I'm really happy to be here today and to have a conversation with contemporary artists on contemporary art in the Caribbean. Every time I get, what's the word? I get nervous about the future. Something like this happens, it reawakens my excitement, and I'm very happy to be here today. I just want to introduce, for the record, everyone here on the panel. Deborah Anzinger represents everything I admire and fear. She was born and raised in Kingston, and like a good Caribbean child, she earned her PhD in 2006 on her way to becoming an artist with the director of a nonprofit art space in Kingston known as NLS. And the acronym stands for New Local Space, and it's intended to share and promote the work of artists locally and in the international sphere, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about that today. She's a fellow recipient, like me, of the American Association of University Women Grant, and she's exhibited work at the National Gallery of Jamaica and at various galleries in Jamaica, the Bahamas, and the United States. Leasho Johnson was born in Montego Bay, where my grandfather was born, Jamaica, and is a graduate of the Edna Manley School of Visual and Performing Arts. He lives and works in Kingston, right? And you work in a variety of media, painting, fashion, sculpture, etc. And you produce works that I think are very much rooted in Jamaican life, but resonate much more broadly. You have been a featured artist at the National Gallery of Jamaica. You've been honored as for your emerging practice, and I think Deborah has written on your work, and she said it playfully confronts issues of gender identity, social stigma, and the legacy of history on our lived realities. That's you have a lot to talk about today. Right? and Marlon James on the end there was born in 1980 in Kingston and has made his way to photography from sculpture while also a student at the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts. His practice is very varied, from darkroom to digital, from black and white to color, from fashion to fine art, and he focuses for the most part on the human figure, bringing all the complexities of the medium into play in his photography. And he currently lives and works in Trinidad. Nicole Smythe-Johnson is a curator and writer based in Jamaica. She earned her BA in Humanities, Media, and Cultural Studies at Macalester College in Minnesota, and the MA in Post-Colonial Literary and Cultural Studies at the University of Leeds in North England. You served as a senior curator at the National Art Gallery of Jamaica, where you curated the Natural History Show. You have served as a senior editor of art. I think you have also curated in the Bahamas recently, where you a part of Transforming Spaces, and you are the curator of Float. But in your stories, I think we have a rich potential for a conversation that I hope will be transformative for us who are gathered here, but also could resonate beyond the moment of this space.
We really wanted to think about being Caribbean, but focusing on being, as opposed to articulating, representing these kinds of concepts. And what would it be like to just be Caribbean, to not try to not be Caribbean, and to kind of write that out of it, to kind of free yourself, right? Because that's one avenue that you can take, but to acknowledge your Caribbeanness and to acknowledge the extent to which that informs your work, but also the extent to which so many other things, so many other references inform your work, and there's this broader resonance that can be drawn from it that is not limited to a very but like we were talking about earlier, a very identity-based approach to this issue of Caribbeanness.
I'm interested in my practice in what happens when I take something and I force it to sort of shed some of its history and navigate its space on that experiential level. So on one level with painting, I'm forcing paint to adopt digital aesthetics and this kind of digital vocabulary that is so predominant right now, in our everyday lives. I'm using acrylic paint, but I'm using mark making that's informed by Photoshop. And then on another level, I am taking some of the things that Nicole referenced, this tropicalization, this kind of tropical imagery, and I'm forcing it to butt up against other references such as cutouts from pop music videos. You know, the collages in these two pieces are just digital inkjet prints that have just been like pasted on top of the paintings. So the this kind of tropical landscape is forced to occupy and navigate, occupy and negotiate the space with this music video.
You're giving and you're taking and denying through the color, through the imagery that I like. I like the fact that it's being unmoored. Is that all intentional? Am I hitting on something that you want to, in a sense, disrupt our expectations of the image and what those sort of the historical, I guess, semiotics that are involved with those types of imagery? I mean, what's happening?
What's happening is in the work is actually what it's the mental process of the experience, right? Mm-hmm. Which is just to go back to your original question about whether I'm taking the audience into consideration or not. It's work that wants the audience to accept it, but then it also can't deny itself. Mm-hmm. So you know, it really is just a representation of a mental process. In other words, I'm not thinking, okay, I want to give the audience this and then I want to take it back. I want to reference these kinds of things and then I want to take it back. It's actually the experience. It's like I'm coming into this landscape. It's part of what Krista referencing what Krista Thompson said. It's a lot of these and what Christopher Cozier said with wrestling with the image, but it goes one step further. In other words, there are these things that are internally manufactured, right? So we have these ideas of why it's so nice to live in Jamaica, right? Mm-hmm. Why it's so nice to live in the Caribbean, and why you never want to trade that up. You know, you're living in a paradise, right? But then these things are constructed. You know, they are internally constructed to a certain extent. The landscape is what it is. You know, everything is what it is, and I think it's constructed as to what the value of that is, and so and then we kind of pass that on. So the process of me in the studio and of me in that landscape is sort of letting go of this value system of whether I prize actually being in this kind of environment.
I don't necessarily go for the more glamorous photographs. As you can see, these two images. The one to your left was actually published in the art journal called Small Acts. It was funded by the Andy Warhol Foundation. The theme of that photo shoot was a visual life of a catastrophic history, and that is actually young adults who were bleaching their skin, which is now, I guess you would say, has become a fad.
An epidemic.
Yeah, epidemic.
What do you think about it?
I mean, it's been a year, been happening for hundreds of years. It's not the first time it's happened in Jamaica. It's happened in India. It has happened in China, South Africa. They have it, you know. And so this was a form of documentation, going to an area called Kingston 12 of Jamaica and photographing young adults as young as 18 years old, and the eldest probably 21 years old, who are bleaching their skin. And to the next of it, we have Vogue, which is a Jamaican drag queen. Interesting story for me was that I was asked to be at a party where I had to photograph people against
a gay party, don't forget.
A gay party, yes. It was a gay party. Actually, it was a gay awards, which is also very interesting because it was very underground. And most people, you're screened before you can go there. But I was recommended to be a photographer, and it was really, it should be a red carpet where they had a particular banner, and we had to photograph them. But the promoter for the party did not have a banner, so he asked me if I could do a little in-studio photo shoot. And then I had this lovely drag queen come in front of me and strike several poses. And I thought that, but in a country where we're extremely homophobic, this person, not knowing who I am, but I guess because I'm at this environment's party that I must be totally kosher, which I am. I have no problem with it. But they gave me the most expressive body languages and looks and stares, and they're just so confident and so happy to be who they are.
After going to the art institution, I was in a bit of a conflict because I started to study visual communication, and basically where my art is now, it's very influenced by stuff that I've explored and seen in visual communication, you know, like graphic designing, like Tokyo Plastic, what's the other one, like the Donny dolls, you know, from Kid Robot. I started to see a lot of anime stuff, so, and graffiti, yeah, like I like graffiti a lot. So basically at that stage I was in a bit of a conflict because I thought I was so versed in painting and also in drawing these cartoons, and I started to merge them. Where I'm now, I basically started to throw away a little bit the painting aspect, because I found a character that I called an avatar that basically represents who, basically Jamaica and how I see it now. It's heavily influenced by like dancehall and popular culture that's in Jamaica, like daggering. So for example, this one here is called Boom Boom Turn Up Dive, which is taking a little bit of from the song Boom Boom Turn Up, which is a dancehall song.
These are little neon ceramic pieces, right? I talked about available bodies and that kind of thing in terms of how we think about the Caribbean. And these bodies are definitely available, right? You can look at them, you can see a lot of them, right? But as much as these bodies are available for looking at, they also make you look at them. You cannot step into a room where this thing is and not look at it. It's ridiculously neon, right? And a lot of people first encounter them and they're like, oh, they're so cute. And then they realize what's happening, and then they feel really, they're sort of upset by the fact that they found it cute, and then they don't feel good about being drawn into this. And for me, that's also a really significant part of how Leasho's work works. That kind of dissolving of the usual subject-object situation.
If in my art I just take dancehall and I take the culture that I'm exposed to, I can create something brand new. Mm-hmm. And that's what I hope to achieve with these.
Because then you stop looking at it as a contradiction.
Exactly.
Yeah. That has implications that I think are incredibly problematic.
So we're at this really, really interesting juncture where we're actually redefining stuff because there's just nothing else there. So we get to really kind of just say, well, this is how we're doing it.
Yeah, and you have no choice. You have to go.
But I think that's the exciting thing about what's happening in the Caribbean and the Bahamas. Most of those spaces started out as extensions of artist studios just because it had to happen that way. So financially, if an artist had a space, they would just extend it out and transform it into a gallery for a time. And commercial spaces started to develop as extensions of studio spaces, houses, or places where people lived. And that evolved. But the conversation also built. When we first opened NAGB, I remember the person interviewing me asked me, off the record, what's a curator? You know? Again, on the national television. I mean, that conversation wasn't there. Yeah. But in 10 years later, you get into the airport, Madam Curator. Mm-hmm. The average person knows it. Mm-hmm. So there's a way for you to cultivate as people. The public had shifted, and the demand had changed. That level of education, I think you're alluding to, started to make inroads.